Hey everyone, welcome back to K-Korner, the channel where we dive into the wild world of entitled people and their unbelievable stories. Hope you enjoy it, and without further ado, let's go. For those who don't know, a rollator is essentially a walker with wheels. I had a stroke 6 years ago, and my balance and vision were significantly affected. I can walk maybe 20 to 25 feet on a flat surface without assistance, but I need my rollator for longer walks, and always take it with me wherever I go. Normally, I have my groceries delivered weekly to my apartment, but every month or 6 weeks, depending on our schedules, my mom takes me to a specialty grocery store. There, I can purchase a lot of pre-packaged meals that only require a short time in the microwave. We were on one of these trips and waiting in line to check out. The rollator that my insurance covers is made of cheap white plastic, so last Christmas my mom bought me a new one made of black steel and titanium. It also has a pouch on the back for storing things, and a fold-out bench that I can sit on when I need a break by locking the wheels. While my groceries were being checked out, I folded out the bench and sat down to wait. When we were done, I got up and unlocked the wheels while my mom rolled out the cart of groceries. I had barely gone 5 feet when a lady approached and grabbed my rollator, saying, "I'll take this." I responded with no and jerked it away from her, then continued to follow my mom out to the parking lot. Usually, my mom loads the groceries into the car while I leave the rollator on the side and make my way to the passenger seat. After loading the groceries, my mom collapses the rollator and places it on top of the groceries. This lady followed us out to the car and was waiting there, tapping her foot as we loaded the groceries. I didn't trust her, so I stood holding the rollator. My mom said, "Go ahead, get in, it's unlocked." But I shook my head no, and subtly pointed at the lady to indicate why I wasn't getting in. Mom understood and finished loading the groceries. When she was done, she approached me and folded down the rollator while I walked to the passenger side door. She then put the rollator on top of the bags in the car, and was closing the door when the lady started yelling that we were stealing store property. I don't know if someone alerted him or what, but a manager type came out and asked what was going on. The lady screamed that we were stealing the rollator and that she needed to use it. The manager asked my mom about it, and she explained that it was mine, even showing him the plaques bolted on that had my name, emergency contacts, and medications, along with my schedule in case I needed them. The lady kept yelling that she needed it now that we were done. The manager told her that it was mine, it had information specific to me, and that if she needed help, they could find her a mobility scooter or something similar. She didn't like this, and suddenly switched from an angry demeanor to a sweet old lady, saying, "Well, maybe she could leave it here, and I could use it and leave it when I am done for them to come back and get." The manager asked, "Would that be okay with you?" My mom, knowing we would never see it again, said that we couldn't because we had other places to go where I would need it. The lady began yelling again as we drove off. I don't know how it ended for the manager, but I hope he managed to handle the situation well. A couple of weeks ago, I wrote a post because my mom was harassing my sister Pam. This was because my sister finally cut off my mom and refused to give her money. To quickly summarize, my mom told Pam a gigantic and easily debunked lie to guilt Pam into sending her money. The lie caused some drama between me and my sister, but we worked it out because, again, it was a very stupid lie. After the truth came out, Pam finally went no contact with our mom, just like I had done a while ago. Mom started harassing Pam, and even after Pam had blocked her number, Mom would find ways to contact her. She even showed up at the house Pam shares with her roommates. The police were absolutely useless and told Pam and then myself that there was nothing they could do until Mom threatened violence or became violent. The officer I talked to on the phone actually laughed when I mentioned getting a temporary restraining order. It was just a nightmare. So I took some advice from here and got Pam to change her number, and things kind of quieted down. That's when Mom started leaving letters in Pam's mailbox, just drunken ramblings. So we called the police again, specifically after the third one. The officer they sent out was incredibly rude and told my sister, and I quote, "If I had a daughter like you, I'd also be driven to drink." Before anyone asks, yes, we put in a complaint. No, nothing happened. After that, my husband and I sat down, worked out some bills, and contacted a lawyer. We don't know any personally, but I did have a coworker who got divorced last year, so I asked him for the number to the family law practice he hired. $150-ish later, I was able to send Mom an official quit your nonsense letter, and for the past 3 days everything has been blissfully quiet. Then, earlier tonight, which I guess technically is this morning, Sarah, my sister's best friend, called because Pam was too shaken up to talk. The police were at Sarah's house and my mom had been arrested. My husband and I hurried over, and by the time we got there, the police had already left with Mom. Pam was still crying and having a panic attack. Sarah and Heather were trying to calm her down. I'm just so angry thinking about it. The last time I saw Pam crying like that was when she found out she was failing biology in 9th grade. She's a perfectionist, you know. I love her to death, but she's so scared of failing. I had come over and she was just sobbing over a stack of papers, miserable. I told myself she'd never cry like that again, but she did, and it was because of our mom, and I didn't stop it. Because Pam was too upset to talk, Sarah told us that they had been getting ready to go out for a late movie when my mom showed up. At first, Pam told her to just go home. Then Mom started screaming at her, and Pam sort of froze. That's when Heather got involved and told my mom that she was going to call the police if she didn't leave. That seemed to work at first, and from what Sarah said, Mom kind of just wandered off down the street. Pam was shaken up, but it seemed to be over. Then they heard a loud crunching noise from outside, and they looked, and Mom had driven over the neighbor's mailbox, which, to be honest, I didn't notice when I pulled up, but it was flattened. Heather immediately called the police, but I guess so had the neighbors. Then Sarah called us. The police came. Mom refused to do a sobriety test, and they hauled her off. The worst part is, I'm not entirely sure they would have actually arrested her if the neighbors hadn't called too. It's kind of a quiet neighborhood, and the people directly next door seem to be in their 50s or so. Sarah said the husband came out to put in the complaint about the mailbox, and the police talked to them more than they talked to Pam, who was actually getting harassed. Because Pam was so shaken up, we brought her home with us. She thankfully passed out almost immediately, and then my husband fell asleep, but I can't sleep. I'm so angry. Mom could have hurt someone, and the police have done absolutely nothing up to this point. I'm sure we'll have more options now that she's been arrested. Maybe we can even get a restraining order. But if they had just listened to me weeks ago when Mom first started harassing Pam, none of this might have happened tonight. Forget her. Edited to add, because I forgot to mention I live about an hour away from my sister. When Sarah called, I had fallen asleep on the couch while my husband Ryan was playing video games. So by the time I got up, got dressed, and drove over, nearly 2 hours had passed. I work at the front desk of a hotel. I won't mention the hotel's name because it's not relevant. Yesterday, we had a guest checking in. It was just him and his wife. I'll repeat, just one man and one woman. Basic math. What does 1 + 1 equal? 2. The day before his check-in, I had to call him to let him know that both of our presidential suites were unfortunately booked, and we would have to switch him to an executive suite with a king-sized bed. It's a big room. He got very upset. He yelled at me over the phone, insisting that he had the right to his presidential suite. He asked why he couldn't have what was his, and I told him that both suites had been booked since last year and wouldn't be available until November 2025. He literally told me to move those guests to a different room. Again, I told him I couldn't do that. He started yelling and cursing at me, saying that he paid for a presidential suite. I agreed, and to be fair, I lowered the nightly rate to $99 for the inconvenience. I checked his reservation to make the changes, and, oof, he was only staying for one night, just one night. After I lowered the price, and keep this in mind, he was still staying in a suite, so he got a major discount. His balance went from $149.99 to $99. My manager really didn't want any problems that day. Instead of saying, "Thank you," or "I appreciate it," he said, "It should be lower since you caused me so much stress. But whatever, I guess I'll just take it. You're useless anyway." He then hung up. The next day, he checked in with his wife. I greeted them and asked under what name he was checking in. He stood there and threw his ID and credit card at me. Then he kept talking with his wife about how he got downgraded because we were stupid, and that we just don't know how important he is. Then he asked me again to move him to his presidential suite and proceeded to ask who took the presidential suite from him. I canceled his reservation after that and asked security to escort him out. He resisted, kept demanding the suite, and his wife was just nodding and yelling with him. Long story short, he got banned from the hotel. It was the audacity for me. So ridiculous, I swear. Okay, update, edit. I'm not the best at storytelling, and I typed all that out after a 12-hour shift, so let me explain. 1. Yes, the presidential suite was $149.99 due to the guest being a member. It's not that expensive because I live in a small city. There are only 2 hotels in my city. We border Mexico, so it's genuinely a small city. That's why the prices are different from other hotels. 2. The people who booked the suite are part of the military, so it's essentially their home until 2025. We have 90% of the hotel filled with military personnel, so we easily get overbooked, which is exactly what happened. 3. It's out of my control because I cannot close the rooms on the system. Only my manager can. I went in that day, thinking we were fully booked, since my manager told me, "We have no rooms available." My manager was the one who forgot to close the rooms on the system online. So we got overbooked. I had to cancel many reservations that day, and thankfully everyone was understanding. The only one who wasn't was that one guy. By the time he came, someone had called to cancel their reservation, so one became available, which was for the executive suite with a king-sized bed, but he didn't want it. I remember, I was trying to sympathize with him because of the inconvenience, and thought that since he was only staying for one night, it would be fine for him to stay in an executive suite instead. He escalated the situation when I was trying to come up with a solution. Also, 4. Front desk receptionists are 100% allowed to cancel reservations if they do not feel safe or comfortable around the guest. When I got the job, my manager made that known to me, especially since the area I live in has a lot of crime. I work night shifts, so I've experienced a lot worse interactions than this one. 100%. I did what I did because I did not feel comfortable with him throwing his ID and credit card at my face. Enjoying the stories yet? If you do, please subscribe, like, and comment. So I've got an acquaintance, Richard, who has always been of the "I know better than you" school of thought. What makes it worse is that he literally received his PhD in physics from one of my country's top universities about 6 months ago. So he's not a dummy. The problem is that he thinks that because he's a physics genius, that means he knows better than everyone about everything. Just an example, my kids are in Montessori schools. This is a decision my wife and I reached together, and we're very happy with it. When he heard, he went on a 30-minute rant lecture about how we're throwing our money away, and Montessori is nonsense. When I told him that I had read and even professionally translated studies proving the opposite, and gave him some real-world examples. Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Sergey Brin, Jeff Bezos, Larry Page, etc. He still would not admit he might not be 100% correct. Not the subject of this revenge, but so you understand the person we're dealing with. Another thing that's important to note is that Richard does not have Asperger's or anything similar. We joke about this all the time, and he's been tested from here until next week. He's just a really smart, socially oblivious pain in the neck. Given all of the above, I try to limit my time with him, but unfortunately, that isn't always possible. And last week we were both at the same group braai for a friend, Jack, who was visiting back home from overseas. I've known Jack since grade school, so we brought our families and made it more than just a long time no see type of thing. At some point later on in the afternoon, my eldest, let's call him Awesome, 10yo, came to me really sad and said she wanted to go home. When I asked her why, she said that Richard had just spent 15 minutes telling her that she shouldn't eat hot dogs because they're unhealthy, and he explained what went into hot dogs and what they're made out of. Awesome is not a vegetarian, knows that the beef and chicken she eats used to be live animals, and has never professed interest in vegetarianism. At the same time, when a kid is eating a hot dog, they don't care or want to know what's inside. We spoke a bit, I calmed her down, and I told her to ignore Richard and go play with her siblings and her friends. Being a kid, she was thankfully easily distracted by something else and moved on. I didn't want to make a fuss with Jack or with Richard, so I just let it be. This turned out to be a mistake. About 30 minutes later, I heard Awesome scream and began crying. I ran over to her. Richard had come up to her and knocked her hot dog out of her hand, saying she shouldn't eat that garbage. I handed Awesome over to my wife for damage control, and I took Richard aside and told him that A, you don't ever talk to a man's kids without permission, B, you don't ever teach a man's kids without permission, and C, you sure as heck don't ever touch a man's kids without permission. He doesn't have kids, so I still wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. This turned out to be a mistake. Instead of doing the mature thing and moving on, he decided to double down on the hot dog issue. This was the hill he was going to die on. My kids shouldn't be eating hot dogs. Keeping Jack in mind, I disengaged and told him to stay away from my family. After this, I kept my eye on him, and he didn't come near them. Jack enjoyed his time. We all ate some good meat. End of the story as far as I'm concerned. This turned out to be a mistake. A few days later, we received a visit from a child protection officer who claimed that we were neglecting our kids, specifically Awesome. She came in and saw that while the house could have been cleaner, what house with kids is spotless? Everything was fine. She sat with Awesome for a few minutes and asked her some questions, said everything was fine, and left. First thing I did was call a friend of mine who is a lawyer, just to be on the safe side. He said it looked to him like we were in the clear, but we should keep in touch with him just in case. Next, I began working the grapevine. It turned out that Richard had been offended by how I treated him after the hot dog incident, so he filed a false anonymous report. Being Richard, and never thinking he could ever be wrong, he was even talking about it as if people should be proud of him for what he did. I had to make sure though, so the last thing I did before dropping the hammer on him was confronting him personally. I set my phone to record and went to his house. He doubled down yet again, saying we were torturing Awesome. He's the one who called protective services on us, and he'd do it again in a heartbeat. This turned out to be a mistake. I'm not the violent type, but I swear I wanted to break the jerk in half. I told him that if he came near myself or anyone in my family again, I'd have a restraining order put out on him, and I'd make sure every single one of our shared acquaintances knew why. I listened to the recording in my car, and his admission that he filed a false report came out clear as day. I immediately forwarded it to my lawyer, who said he'll get the ball rolling with some friends of his, with the public prosecutor, to see if we could get Richard in trouble, using his admission. Still waiting on that, the wheels of justice turn slowly sometimes. Then, I enacted my actual revenge. See, after he got his PhD, Richard bragged about the new flat he'd be moving into as soon as he sold his current flat. To that end, he renovated most of his current flat, including putting in lots of new and expensive features that required lots of electrical work. He did the same in his new flat. He did most of the electrical work himself, which is a big no-no unless you're licensed. I called in an inspector on both of his flats, who asked to see certification on who did the electrical work. Obviously, there was no certification. It wouldn't surprise me if, Richard being Richard, he began arguing with the inspector that his work was good enough and he didn't need to pay someone else to do it for him. I haven't seen or spoken to Richard since, but I've heard that he had to bring in a certified electrician to examine every single change he made in both flats. This meant dismantling everything and having it inspected. Turns out the buyers of his old flat weren't happy with the delay in receiving the keys, and were even unhappier when they learned why there was a delay. They walked away from the deal and are taking him to court. Because his sale fell through, he's now in the hole paying mortgages on 2 flats. I don't know if there was a fine levied against him, but I sure as hell hope so. Lesson of the story: you don't ever screw with a man's kids. Let's start this story by saying this happened 12 years ago. I'm now happily married with 3 children, and regret absolutely nothing. I was with my new ex for 3 years. I had noticed that she was being extremely controlling. I was expected to give every little detail of my day and tell her my schedule in advance, and if I deviated from that, she would be very upset. She chalked it up to just bad feelings she was having and shrugged it off as her paranoia from past relationships involving infidelity. I had never once cheated or strayed, and I never gave her a reason to act like this. It felt unbecoming of my fiancé to act in such a way. Now, this is where it gets interesting. After she had asked for my schedule to make plans, as mine tends to be more hectic than hers, I noticed she was texting someone. In my line of work, if I put in more than 40 hours, I have the ability to take time off at will as long as the work is completed at a later date. I was very good friends with her brother and still am. We laugh about this to this day, and he actively reminds her of it. I messaged him stating I wanted to do something special for her, a little bit earlier than our anniversary to make sure it was a special surprise. They both worked in the same fabrication facility. He was a fabricator, and she was a shipping manager. He was kind enough to let me know her schedule. That's where the discrepancy falls into place. Without my knowledge, she was foregoing overtime. She worked 12-hour shifts Monday through Friday, with the exception of Wednesday, when she would only work half a day. She had been taking Wednesdays off right around the time she started getting extremely controlling. Lucky for me, I had stacked several days of leisure time up, so taking a Wednesday off for me was not an issue. A few days go by, and Wednesday is here. I put on my work gear and leave for work. I was expecting her to leave, as our apartment complex had 2 exits on the same road I could see directly across from a shopping center. So I parked my car near the back and waited. After about an hour, I noticed a very specific red Mustang with a specific decal on the back window. It was her cousin by marriage. I had also done my due diligence to take an old laptop, which we kept on our desk in an office area with a full view of the living room, bedroom door, bathroom, and kitchen. I had set it up for remote access and had it alert me when the webcam noticed movement. Giving her the benefit of the doubt, I thought he might be dropping something off or coming over to assist her with something, as her family sometimes does. Sure enough, a message came through. So I accessed my laptop remotely. He walked through the door without skipping a beat. She unbuttoned his shirt and began kissing him. I created a URL link for the live stream. While she was preoccupied, I shared the link in our family group text and friend group text. They were both part of it, but at the time they were currently indisposed and didn't look at their phones. They didn't even wait. They could have gone to the bedroom, but no, they decided to get intimate right there on the couch. I sent the link off to the friend group chat and the family group chat. Within minutes, I was getting calls non-stop from friends and family alike. There was no turning back. She was getting blown up, but she was ignoring her phone. Not until the 4th or 5th call came through did they decide to take a break. For context, the state I live in allows recording of personal property regardless of occupancy. I was the only one on the lease. She wasn't allowed to be on the lease because of poor credit. The call she picked up was from her cousin's mother, whom she was involved with. She answered the phone on speaker, and I kid you not, the first words out of his mother's mouth were, "Stop seeing my son." They both became rigid, and she began to stutter over her words, saying, "What are you talking about?" etc. The mother then divulged that there was a live feed of them sent out by me to her family. She grabbed every pillow off the couch and covered herself up. The cousin staggered off, trying to put on his pants and shoes, just to trip himself up and bang his head on my coffee table, leaving it with a dent. By this time, I had made my way to the front of the apartment complex. I was there to greet the adulterer as he came out of the front exit. He froze and began to cry, apologizing profusely. I'm not going to lie, what happened afterward wasn't my best moment, and I nearly got into legal trouble if it weren't for the fact that he was trespassing on private property. Let's just say I had a cast for 6 weeks, and he wasn't in any family photos for months. I went up to the apartment, where she was now fully clothed and crying inconsolably. I asked her if it was mucus or saliva on her face. Then I told her not to answer because it didn't matter anyway. I gave her 1 hour to remove all her belongings, as again everything in the apartment was mine, except for clothes, some makeup and a few kitchen utensils. Her mother would not let her move in, as she was just filled with embarrassment. The same was true for her brothers, and the cousin's mother kicked her son out. Rumor spread around our town very quickly, and for lack of better words, she was untouchable. This story is so weird. When I was 20 years old, I, a 27-year-old woman, was in a complicated relationship with a guy who is now 40 years old. It was a mess. We were on and off for almost 5 years. He was always clear that he wasn't ready for a relationship, and I was always clear that I was madly in love with him. Every time I got tired of the situation and wanted to leave, he somehow convinced me to stay. He said love is free. We have so much time together, and he wasn't ready to commit. I asked for advice from my sister, who is now 42 years old, and she gave me some terrible advice. She suggested making him compromise, leaving things at his place, and basically turning him into a boyfriend until it was too late for him to say no. I never managed to do that because I wanted him to love me as much as I loved him, not trap him. During the last night I spent at his place, he said he wanted to try something more serious with me. He talked about some dates he had planned, only to ghost me forever. It was hard. He was the first person I loved, and he treated me terribly. 6 months passed, and my sister came home. We both lived with our parents. She wanted to introduce her brand new boyfriend. She had had a lot of boyfriends, but she said this one was the one. It was a dinner with only my parents at our home, so I was excluded and expected to just go out or chill in my room. The day came, and while they were dining, I ordered a pizza. I came downstairs only to find the guy that I first was with 6 months prior dining with my parents and sister. I was shocked but paid for my pizza and went back to my room to cry. After dinner, I confronted my sister in front of our parents and begged her not to be with him, to be loyal to me, her little sister. There was no way she didn't know who he was. I had shown her pictures of him, his social media, where he worked, and she even knew where he lived. They never met because he didn't want to meet my family and never introduced himself. But she knew who he was, and she excluded me from that dinner because she knew. She said they met by chance after we stopped seeing each other. She knew how hard that breakup was for me. She knew how painful it was not to have closure. He just stopped replying, not even blocking me, just left me wondering after 5 years. She knew that during those 6 months I was still hurting. I know it was my fault. I was too naive and thought that if I stayed long enough, he would be ready for the relationship I wanted, and would learn to love me. Stupid, I know. She defended herself, saying it was a coincidence and there was chemistry. She loved him, and she wasn't going to lose the love of her life. This stuff only happens once in a lifetime. When I was in my early 20s, I would have believed that. However, now I know that there are 8 billion people in this world. There's no one love of your life. You can find the love of your life multiple times if you look for it. My parents sided with her and said I should get over it since we never had a real relationship. 1.5 years have passed. I've been excluded from multiple family gatherings because he would be around, and my family thinks I will bring negative vibes since I'm still bitter about everything. I have no feelings for him, but I feel betrayed by my sister and my parents. He is just a despicable person in my eyes now. My sister is now 6 months pregnant. Due to her age, she has been extremely pampered by my parents. She still lives at home and is going to move in with him maybe 2 months after the baby is born. Then they're going to marry. In my culture, it is normal that if a woman gives birth, she moves back or stays with her mom so the mom can help with the baby for the first months. A week ago, my sister's friends made a surprise baby shower. I happened to be at home. I tried to talk to them. I don't know why. Maybe because my sister and I were so close before and I'm sad we're no longer friends. But her friends acted like I wasn't there and only replied to me with yes, no, or silence, as if I were the one who created this mess or I was a homewrecker or I tried to seduce my sister's man. I was planning to move already. I was saving money, etc. But after that, I left immediately to a friend's house. I'm in the process of finding my own place. 2 days ago, I received a call from my parents asking me to have a talk. I went to their house and they informed me that the diamond earrings my grandma left me would be given to my sister. Those earrings have been in my family for 4 generations. Before my grandma died, she said the earrings would be mine and my sister would receive a gold necklace. Grandma trusted my parents with the earrings. There was no will or anything. She just asked to give them to me when I was mature enough to appreciate and take care of a family heirloom. Now my parents think since my sister is getting married first and is having grandma's first great-grandchild, my sister should have them. I'm really angry now. They're robbing me of something my grandma left to me. I don't think my parents are evil. I think they were too worried my sister wouldn't marry due to her age. Again, in my culture, a single woman in her 40s is something to worry about for her family. Now that she's forming a family, they want to reward her with everything. But I was the closest to my grandma. She made it clear the earrings would be mine, not my sister's, not the first one to marry or have a child, but mine. After 2 years of being excluded in favor of my sister, I gave an ultimatum to my parents. They give the earrings to me as my grandma intended or I will cut them from my life forever. Not going to lie, the idea of cutting my family off is too painful. But I feel they have already wronged me so much, and still do, that I don't want them in my life anymore. I feel a little shallow fighting over this, but those are the only things my grandma left that are not entitled to them. Update: yes, I got the earrings. After my post, I went to my parents' house, opened the safe, took the earrings, and left. Then, after that, I went again, told my parents I needed time to process stuff and be my own self, and gave them the house keys. I said I was leaving for good. There were some tears from my mom, saying she couldn't believe I was such a bitter person. She raised me better. I was turning my back on my family over nothing, and it was shameful that I would leave the family house without being married or anything. So it was never about me or her loving me or anything but social pressure to keep an outdated tradition. My dad was very neutral, gave me a hug and wished me luck. For 2 months nothing happened, and I barely had contact with my family. I found a place to live, tried to heal, and had fun decorating my new home. Your normal stuff. Then everything happened at once. For those 2 months my sister and mom never reached out to me. Only my dad sent a text once a week asking how I was and wishing me well. Then, my sister's boyfriend, future husband, and also my ex started following me on Instagram again. I found it weird, but anyway, after all, he's my sister's boyfriend, father of my niece, future brother-in-law, and my ex-friend with benefits. Then he started to like my stories and replied to them with heart emojis and looking good. This happened maybe 3 times. When I received a voicemail from my mom calling me all sorts of names for going after a man that I knew was engaged, she said this was some kind of revenge over my poor sister, and I was causing her so much stress her blood pressure level was sky high. I was an inconsiderate femme fatale, and she raised me better. Later, I learned through a cousin that my sister took her fiancé's cell phone and found several conversations with several women, including his attempts to talk to me. Of course, she went to my mom crying about me trying to steal her fiancé. All messy, to be honest. Less than a week later, another voicemail from my mom asking me where the earrings were. She went looking for them and, when she couldn't find them, deduced it was me. She called me a thief, a disgrace, dishonored me, and said they didn't consider me family anymore. I was dead to them, and she would be taking legal action against me for theft if it was possible. I had no option but to block her, my sister, and other family members who sided with them. My dad later texted me to let me know my mom went nuts, and they wouldn't take any legal action. By the end of last month, My cousin texted me saying my sister had given birth to my niece. I know I shouldn't have, but I did it. I went to the hospital with a gift while wearing my beautiful and fancy earrings. I was kicked out, of course, but it was worth it. I have no plans to see them ever again. Well, maybe my dad. Also my cousin, who is a big gossiper, let me know my sister is getting married in May, so she will have her happily ever after all. But I'm also living my best life. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more captivating stories. Share your own experiences and opinions in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay tuned for more epic tales.